and I'm just looking at a piece of music that I had up from yesterday when I did a little music stream. So let's just cover some basics. Let's check out what's going on. First and foremost, when we have a 3 with a bracket, that's what we call a triplet. The best way to divide a triplet is to say the words one-ander. Some people say triplet. It's a crotchet triplet, which means that the notes that are housed within the triplet are crotchet in value. Hey, Prongovat. So if you can see here, crotchet triplets, 3 crotchet triplets equal the value of 2 crotchets. Okay, so you've got 3 notes that are evenly splayed out across. Let me just pop my. Sorry, 2 notes. Notifications off. 3 notes that are evenly splayed across the value of 2 beats. Yeah. The alternative is quite common. Quaver triplets. So quaver triplet would be like this, and quaver triplets equal 1 crotchet beat. So here we see beat 1 here, and then beat 3 here, because a set of 3 crotchet triplets take up 2 beats, and therefore once we've spanned 3 of them, we're going to move on to beat 3. Okay. So here's how we do it. We go 1 and 3 and yeah. You can go triplet, triplet. Usually when we have a crotchet triplet, they're quite broad, they're quite spaced out. We don't want to be too robotic when we play them. So we'll keep digging apart this bar a little more. You can see that there are squiggly lines, vertical squiggly lines, which are referred to as arpeggios. That's the line for an arpeggio. Arpeggio is a broken chord. So that's an arpeggio. Most commonly played as do-do-do-dee-dee-dee-dum when you have to do an exercise to play an arpeggio. So in this case, the arpeggio is very small and more or less harp-like. I would say that this would be played on some form of harp, which let me just find you a harp. 2 moments. Let's not worry about the harp. So as opposed to bing, 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 it's ying, 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 ying. That's my little thing for it. Ying, 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 ying. Liump, 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 liump. Yeah. So the idea, thanks, Lauren. I should put the chat windows in the Zoom so you don't think I'm just going nuts. That's okay. So here's what we get. We get an arpeggio in the left hand. Ba, 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 ba. So together we get shum, 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 shum. That make sense? Yeah. Crotchet triplets with an arpeggio. Very much the vertical is an arpeggio, as well as thanks for coming, Wengi. That's okay, Lauren. No stress. So he's got split personality. That's okay. Also, the phrase is an arpeggio. Okay, the phrase itself is more or less an arpeggio. At least in the left hand, it's an arpeggio. That's a chord that we'll break down in a second. But the right hand is also not quite an arpeggio per se. If you break down each note, there would be an arpeggio, but in this sense, it's actually an inversion. So each time the chord is going higher, we're just inverting the chord, which means that we're taking the bottom note and putting it up an octave. So I know there's a lot of ledger notes here, by the way. Totally get that. So this guy's a D. And this guy's a D because this guy's an E. And when you go back 1 space, you get a D. Yeah? And then when you go back 1 line, you get a C. You just go back in the alphabet. Back 1 space, you get a B. Back 1 line, you get an A. Back, you get a G. And then an E. Okay, so We obviously haven't spent too much time working on actual note stuff, but the idea there is if you can at least use your reference and find a reference point for where the notes are. So in this case, the space below the bottom line is a D, because the bottom line's an E. Every good boy deserves fruit. And when you're going line, space, line, space, line, space, when you're going up the manuscript, or in the direction up, this way, you were going up the alphabet, or in the loop sequentially. And when you're going down, you'll be going backwards. Is everyone okay with that? Yeah? Cool. Just shout out if you have any questions. So let me just get rid of that. Let's look at this a little bit more. So we've got our crotchet triplet, commonly with a bracket, sometimes not a bracket. Sometimes the bracket is implied. That's just an aesthetic choice sometimes, not always. And then we've got common time, which means 4/4. Common time is 4/4. Okay, 4 beats per bar. And then the key signature, which is indicated by the accidental at the beginning, which is a B flat. So if we go back to our circle of fifths, which I'll just draw C major. C major always starts at the top with no accidentals. So C major, no accidentals, no sharps, no flats. If I move to the right by 1 notch, I add 1 sharp. When I move to the left by 1 notch, I add 1 flat. Okay. So, and there's inherent relationships between the keys that we're moving to and toward. So we begin at C major, and the idea is the circle of fifths is that we go up by 5 notes and we go to the next notch. So G major will have 1 sharp. Okay, as to what sharp that is, we kind of have to dig a little deeper as to find that. It's always going to be a semitone under the root note as you keep going around the circle of fifths. So as you add an extra sharp here, 2 sharps, you're going to get D major. And then so you're going to keep the F sharp that you've just had, and you're going to add a C sharp, which is a semitone under D major. Under D, sorry. But in this case, we've got a flat key, okay? So we actually move back by a fifth. We go C back to F. Oh, hello. Let me get rid of it. C back to F. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and when we move to the left, we add 1 flat. When we move 2 to the left, we add 2 flats, which is B flat. And so what we do there is keep the B flat and then add an E flat. So doing it this way doesn't necessarily mean that you know what the sharps and flats are. You do have to do a little bit more research as to what the key is actually constructed of, which is tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone to actually work out the major scale. But do know that when you're going back here, you're going to flatten the 4th note. So for example, if you move back to F, play all the notes of C major from F to F. You're gonna flatten the 4th note. Are you okay with that? And then I'm gonna go down 5 notes. Remember, it's B flat now. And so now I'm in B flat major. So I play all the notes of F major. And then I get the 4th note. And then I flatten it. Now I've got B flat major. And I can do that again. B flat down to E flat. The 4th note is an A natural in B flat major. But I'm gonna flatten it. Okay, so, but the circle of fifths is more as, firstly, it's a pretty wonderful thing. It's a bit hard to understand the how to apply it and what use it has at times. But if you see a key signature has got 1 flat and you're like, what's going on here? You see 1 flat, then it's like, what notch is it on the circle of fifths? It's 1 notch to the left. It's 1 flat. It's F major. How are we doing with that? Classic Zoom thumbs up. I live by it. It's great. Okay, cool. So we're in F major. Okay, F major. If you're playing it on the piano, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, if you don't know what the numbers are, of course, the thumb is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, you start with 1. And if you're playing on the piano, F major. Lauren's just saying that she forgot she's not on Zoom and she's nodding and giving thumbs up. Thanks, Lauren. Today is a day. Today is absolutely a day. I agree. Cool. So, what is he saying? He's getting distracted. That's our F major. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the fingering. If you want to keep going, you tuck the thumb under on the F up the octave. Tuck the thumb under. So we're in F major, which means that when I'm reading the first chord and I see D, B, G, E, which of course will take me a while to work out, I am at a point myself where I can see that shape and I get oozes of C9. So I kind of get the chord that it is. Also, you will eventually get used to seeing space, and learn that actually you skip a note more or less on the piano. But, I'm not done yet. So the idea here is that I flatten the B. So I go B flat. And there's my first chord. And of course, if I was in a different key, this chord would sound a bit strange. But as soon as I incorporate the C that's in the left hand, it gives me a lot more context. So the C is the fifth note of F major, and the fifth note is referred to as the dominant. The dominant has a strong pull to the 1, okay? So also a dominant chord, so a chord can function like a dominant, and it can also be a dominant chord. So if it's functioning like a dominant, it actually means that it wants to move back to 1. It's going to move back to the 1. If the chord is a dominant chord, it's going to have a flat 7, as well as a major third. So in the context of this, we've got a C, we've got the major third, or a natural third. Okay, so in the key of C major, it would be an E. We've got a fifth, perfect fifth to G. And instead of a B natural, which you'd see in a C major chord, it's actually B flat, which means that this C major no longer belongs to the key of C major, it belongs to the key of F major. It's using ingredients from the F major scale. You with me? Jack.
I was just going to ask, so any chord that you want to function as a dominant, is that just a way to say, oh, this chord is pulling towards home, like it's pulling towards the tonic?
Yeah.
So like, could a diminished chord be a dominant? Like be functioning as a dominant, kind of?
Can be. Diminished chords are a bit of this ambiguous beast. Diminished chords can, of course, so when we talk about functioning as a dominant, we're talking about the grammar of the piece. The short answer is yes, by the way. But yeah, when we're talking about the grammar of the piece, we're going, where's the tension and where's going home, as you said. Where's the tension, where's going home? Where's the tension, where's going home? As our ears evolve, we want to create more tension, we want to go home less. It's a bit boring to go home all the time. So what we do is we prolong the dominant, prolong the idea, prolong it. Let's stay over there for a second. How can we keep prolonging it without just playing the same chord? Okay, so bear with me. I'll just go on a slight tangent. This first chord here, in its rudimentary form, all I would do is just continue to play the chord. Okay, that's the fundamental essence of the first bar, right? It's just the same chord, la la la, that's fine. Okay, with a bit of orchestration, a bit of melody, we go, actually, let's arpeggiate the chord. Or invert the chord. So that's one way of prolonging it. Let's assign a bit of rhythm to it. Let's say if it was just in the beginning, the idea is just the chord. Let's do some rhythm, okay? Ba, pa, 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 pa. And now let's harmonize it on the bottom. P, T, T, P, T, T. And then, of course, let's actually alter the tempo by adding an accelerando, which is going to further forward the push and the pull, that you receive. Dum, 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 dum. Diminished chords can sometimes function as a tonic. So sometimes they're either a bit of a passing chord. For example. At this point, so C6, yeah, C6, one chord. Okay, sixth chord is a one chord. C6, C major with a 6. Going to the C sharp diminished. I just say that's a chromatic passing. I wouldn't call it a dominant. I wouldn't call it a dominant because it doesn't have a pull to the C. This actually has a pull to the 2, which is a predominant or a subdominant. So the grammar kind of goes like this. Tonic, subdominant, dominant. Tonic, subdominant, dominant. It's I would see it as a ring or a circle. So you move from the tonic, you go to the subdominant, you go to the dominant, you move back to the tonic. Okay. Now, of course, in some ways you can do what the hell you want. You can move back to the subdominant. You can move back to the tonic. That's fine. But they're kind of the jazz vernacular, or at least the sort of like Tin Pan Alley 20s, 30s kind of stuff that's going on, is we're looking to see how long we can prolong the predominant or subdominant by using chords like the 2 and the 4. Sometimes the 6, but sometimes the 6 is actually more a 1. And then we take the bridge. So we use the bridge of the subdominant and we move to a dominant. And what we can do is, for example, try to think of a way to incorporate a diminished. In this case, I'm using a diminished that's kind of based on the C7. Sorry, I think I'm lagging, but I'm going to C sharp diminished, but the same C sharp diminished that you just heard in relation to C major, da 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 da. You know, that's a passing chord. But in this case, if I play a C7 and then a C sharp diminished, and you want to hear. So in this case, it is functioning as a dominant. So yeah, it's a tricky question. Diminished chords are this weird, vague, ambiguous. They're like chameleons. They can kind of take on the color of whatever's surrounding it. In this situation, if I'm playing a C sharp diminished and I've just played a C7, I'm sort of incorporating the flat 9 of the C7. And as soon as I alter notes of the dominant chord, it becomes like further dominant. It becomes like a more distorted version of that dominant chord. And if I'm going down the tunnel of the dominant chord and altering notes and flattening 9s and flattening 13s and doing all sorts of weird nonsense, at some point, the tension is, going to be so taut that it's like, you need to release it. If you keep altering stuff, you're going to wind up in a different universe. Or at some point you need to release it. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Is that okay? So yeah. Now, of course, you can have dominance of dominants. So that's one key way to prolong the dominant. So instead of going C to F, we go, what's the dominant of C? This dominant of C is a G. So I would work in G7. So that's another way of prolonging the dominant. So let's say, for example, we've got this melody in the first bar. What if I want to do a G7 on the first 3 notes? Just because I'm reharmonizing Zelda like an idiot. So first 3 notes. I'm going to go G7. It still kind of works, D, which is the 5th of G, E, which is the 13th of G, or the 6th, depends how you look at it. I would say it's more the 13 because I'm playing a G7 chord and I'm playing the 7 in the left hand. And then I'm moving to the 5th, and then I'm moving to C. And then, of course, I can do it even further. I can do the dominant of G, which ends up being the tonic of that D. So bear with me for a second. We do all sorts of nonsense stuff on these Mondays, so it's okay if some of it doesn't make sense. So I could go D7. So that's D, G, C. It's a bit boring though. Sometimes we don't want to harmonize a melody just by using the tonic chord. We don't always want to harmonize D with the D chord, because we want to actually vary it up a little bit. If the bass note is also D and the melody is a D, it ends up being a bit boring. So in that case, I could do a tritone sub. So instead of playing a D, I'm gonna reharmonize that with an A flat chord, which is a tritone away. And I won't go into tritone subs this morning. I'll do it another day, just to show you an example though. So here's the D. It's a sharp 4 right now on the A flat. But I'm also going to put a D on the E note and a G. So it's going to go A flat, D, G, C. All right? Okay, this is wild. I wasn't expecting to do this, but that's okay. So D, sorry, la, 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 la. A flat, D, G, C. Now, if you just want to break that down for a second, all we're doing is using the circle of fifths. We're going backwards in the circle of fifths. D, G, C, F, which if we look back to the diagram that I just removed, D is 5 notes away from G, G is 5 notes away from C, and then we're back to F. So, of course, the piece is much simpler than that, yeah? It's just a plain as day dominant chord, okay? So it's a 1, 3, 5, flat 7 with a 9. Really nice, very sweet. Okay, very open. And all we're doing is we're inverting the chord. So every time we play the chord, we're gonna shuffle the highest note up an octave in the right hand. Does that work? Yeah, not quite, but that's okay. The basic sentiment is that the left hand is playing every chord tone. Okay, chord tone is the chords within the chord. Sorry, the tones within the chord, the notes within the chord. So the left hand's not exactly skipping a note. It's not going C, G. It's actually going the next possible note it will play in the chord. Whereas the right hand is very much inverting. So it sounds really pretty and very magical. And as we can see, the tempo mark is tranquillo, tranquil, calming, meditative, all that sort of jazz. We'll move on to the next bar. So it's important to note there's a mezzo piano, which is just a little louder than soft. Dynamics are all relative, so you choose how you want to create those dynamics. And then we move to a tempo, because a tempo is actually imperative that you write that after a cell, because technically if you don't, the cell is just happening indefinitely. And most of the time people don't want that when they put in a cell in. So when you're marking up your music and stuff, if you have a cell or a writ, you must somewhere have a tempo. Not always, but you just have a think. Depends on the context of the piece. If you need to come back to tempo, then it's like write a tempo. A tempo means we're back to the original tempo. In this case, it's probably moving back to that tranquillo 80. It's very odd to have a cell right on the first bar and then to have a tempo, because the tempo hasn't really been established. But that's okay. That's all right. Someone's just transcribed this, so well done to them, Deku trombonist. So let's just look at this harmony for a second before I open up some questions. So if you're on the Twitch, just have a think if you have any questions, and I'll spend a few minutes answering those. Likewise to you guys, of course, but you're not 30 seconds behind. So we have C7, but here we're going to move to the 4 chord. So the chord is a dominant at the first bar, but it's not functioning as a dominant. That's not its function. It's not its job. It's not its role. It's not moving back to the 1. It's actually moving back to the 4. So in some sense, it's like an interrupted cadence, or it's moving to a direction you wouldn't expect. So I don't know. I think that's interesting, because that's a great way of throwing your ears off. Yeah, it's like, oh, I expect it to move to the 1, but it's not. So we look at this. We've got treble clef in the left hand, which is totally possible, by the way. It just means that you're going to play a little higher on the piano, where your right hand may have usually played. And then, so treble clef in the left hand. We've also got 8VA in the right hand. 8VA just means an octave higher. There's a more fancy way of saying that, but so I see an A. I see that A, and generally I'd play the A here. But in this case, it's an octave higher. So it's going to be up here. So let's look. We've got 2 voices in the right hand, by the way. When I say 2 voices, you can see that there are stems up and stems down. So when you're learning choral music, hopefully you tend to see this a lot. You see stems going up, stems going down. It just means that there's 2 different groups singing this tune. 2 different groups. One person singing a certain melody, another group singing another melody. In this case, the melody is actually the stems up. And it's also crotchets, okay? So you can see it's colored in and it stems up. There's no flags or stems or anything, okay? So the melody is actually this. So it's your job as, as an interpreter, whatever, is to bring the melody out. Not to mention, you've got this other voice playing at the same time. So let's say, for example, that's 2 instruments playing this. It means that both of those instruments will play the melody, which gives the melody more volume. Okay, more, it comes out in the foreground a bit more. As a pianist, though, you can't play that note twice. You can only play it, once at one time. Doesn't really work like that. So you just need to make sure that you're playing that first note a little louder. Da, 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 da. Does that make sense? A little bit more emphasis. Yeah. So that's a bit of interpretation. That's a bit of expression. Yeah. Just understanding that there are 2 notes here, 2 instruments effectively playing this note. You are one instrument, so you need to give it a bit more emphasis by either de-emphasizing what else is being played, or giving a bit more oomph to the volume. So this is quite a large span, by the way. So you've got a G minor in the left hand. Sorry, G minor chord being played. D. The next 3 notes are G minor. Okay. In the context of the chord we're playing, which is a B flat major 7, it's not quite a G minor. So bear with me. I'm just going to rattle off a few things that probably won't make a lot of sense. So A, that's fine. G, that's a G minor chord for sure. Yeah. F sharp. So what I'm looking for when I'm playing or sight reading, I'm constantly looking for patterns. In this case, I can quite clearly see that the G minor, which is here, is repeating. So if I go gee-dee-dee, 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 yeah, I'm constantly thinking ba-dee-dum, 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 ba-dee-dum. And as sight reading, I'm trying to look for the pattern so I don't have to rethink. I don't have to execute the thought every single time I see the note. Of course, when I was reading this the first time, I was definitely doing that because I was freaking out a little bit. It's quite unusual to have a hand span of a major 9. And if you look, we haven't really covered compound intervals. We haven't really covered intervals too much, to be honest. But this interval between the low G and the top A is a major 9. It's quite a large span for the pianist. Also can cause a lot of tension if you're not playing it in the right way, if you're not moving the wrist and creating a bit of fluidity around that. But already upon analysis, I go, oh, that's the melody. Die, 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 die. And I can see that in between, ba-da-dee-dum, 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 de-ba-dee-ba. You want to do something even extra, which is a bit difficult, again, could cause a bit of tension. You hold down the note. You hold down the melody note. You keep it depressed or pressed in whilst you're playing the other notes. That's quite hard, okay, without actually causing a bit of tension in the back of the palm, back of the hand, but you can work on that. Whilst the left hand is going, look here, so it's an 8 VB, right? That's a bit tricky. Like, that's a bit sneaky. That means octave lower. So it's not the B flat that is underneath the middle C, it's 1 octave lower than that. But then the AVB line moves, it goes away. So it means I actually play just a plain old B flat. So it's ba-do-da-day, ba-do-da-da-dee-dum. It's not really it's not melodic at all. It has a certain melody to it, but that's not the purpose of this line. It's not in the foreground. It's actually quite pretty still though. So we get you don't really listen to it, but once you actually analyze it, you go, ah. And then I would say, even as if I'm playing this properly, I would want to soften that voice. I want to make it a little softer so it doesn't detract from the actual melody. So the basic analysis of this is like 5 chord, 4 chord, D, da, da, F major in first inversion, D, di, 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 G minor 7, di, 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 F major 7. We're a tonic. The end of the song. But not quite, because the melody goes da. The melody leads you somewhere else. It's cool. It's great. I love it. We're back again to the 4. Die, 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 die. This guy. That's interesting. So it's kind of like a F major to sort of a D7 to a G minor. D, 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 da, D to a C7. The C7 is the dominant. That's fine. You know, it's quite unusual to have a 4-note. The 4th degree is the F in the C, by the way, in that melody. Die, 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 die. It's quite unusual to have the 4th degree in a dominant chord because it kind of confuses the matter a little bit, which we won't cover too much right now because it's a bit, I'll go on for a little longer. But the basic sentiment here is that we've got a bar of C7, which is just going to lead us back to the top. So what this piece is kind of serving to do, which is totally up to the interpreter, to be honest, but, you know, for the most part, without a lot of analysis, I would say this music is meant to deviate the listener. It's kind of make you think something's going to happen, but it's not going to be what you expect it to. Not only that, we see through the undulating semiquavers that it creates a sense of mystery, or at least hypnosis. Whereas the melody is meant to be, don't worry about the mystery, okay? Just listen to this beautiful melody. It's quite romantic. To have the chromatics on the strong beat, that's quite a romantic thing to do. And then hopefully with the bear with me for 2 seconds. With the, I'm going to find my harp. I know I said I didn't want to faff around with it before, but it'll just make it worth it. You know, let's just play it on I'll find a Celeste. This will give you the same idea. Actually, I think this is what it's on in the actual game. See, this band is way too large. Back again to the 4. Quite an open chord. All right, friends. Let's leave it there, shall we? So let's have a few minutes. If you have questions, if you got to run, just run. But if you'd like to ask me some questions, go nuts. You happy? Your brain's full? Including the Twitches. If you have any questions, please shout out. If you like what you were watching. See you, Diona. Yeah, that was a lot. She ran away. She's like, no, thank you. Are you happy with that, Jack?
Yeah, I am, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything related to the conversation.
Yep.
But thank you.
That's all right. If you like, feel free to just email me or message me, especially if it's completely unrelated, because it can help me. I'll focus on that in the future if you have a piece or something you want me to analyze.
Sick.
Cool. All right. You enjoy the rest of your Monday.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
See ya.
Bye.
Prongobot. Prongobot. Is this like near the basics of music theory? The honest question, the honest answer is not quite. I sort of The way I do my music theory, usually I do fundamentals basics, with which I do have a YouTube channel, Music Theory with Daniela, which covers a bit more of the basic stuff. But I usually cater it to whoever's in the room. So it's nice to know who's around. Otherwise, I would say that the way I teach, it's like I'll go over here and over there and over there, and hopefully you pick something up, and then you get super confused, and then you pick something up over here. And hopefully it just prompts the questions so you can clarify kind of, am I understanding correctly? Of course, if I did start at the pure basics, which I can do, I can focus a whole session on like how to read music. If you so choose to want me to direct it that way, that doesn't bother me at all. Then it'd be more like, what note is this? How do we find it on the piano? The stuff we covered today actually was a bit more complex, just because I've got a few people watching who have a bit more of a substantial knowledge in music theory. Does that answer your question?